Andrew Neil has dismantled a Scottish independence campaigner on Twitter who claimed that Scotland would be the world's second biggest trade exporter if it was independent. Mr. Neil lashed out at Francis Johnston, who questioned if he had evidence to back up the claims. Mr. Johnston tweeted, "Every other nation in the world would be knocking on our doors for we'd be the second biggest exporter in the world with Indy." But the BBC Politics Live host hit back and said, "Very interesting. What source are you citing for Scotland being the second biggest exporter on the planet? And if it's so big, how come Scotland runs such a huge balance of payments deficit? Thank you in anticipation." Mr. Johnston said back, "Well, if talking about the GERS figures and deficit, they are false figures. We as only 8% of the population have most deficit, with over half the UK deficit, while England with the biggest population has the least, only 8% of the deficit, which is always unchallenged." But Mr. Neil joked that if Johnston was on Cooking Sherry, and hit back saying, "By the way, I asked, because you raised it, about Scotland's balance of payments deficit. You've replied with some gibberish about Scotland's fiscal deficit. Two entirely different deficits. Have you finished all the cooking sherry already?" Mr. Neil's tweet sparked a huge divide between Unionist and Indy supporters, with one saying, "Coming from England, I'd love Scotland to be given independence, but they'd have to use their own currency, not be tied to ours. Separate passports, the whole 9 yards. If you want it, you can have it, but it's a clean break." Another fumed, "Good grief. If you could reason with a nationalist, they wouldn't be a nationalist." A third posted, "To be fair," he said, "would be, in a future in which there is a mythical rush to buy post-Indy Scottish produce. Totally reasonable precognitive position." A final person fumed, "Andrew well knows that Scotland is not allowed to have a debt. The country is sustained from the allocation from London. Then on top of that, we are also allocated a debt that we didn't spend. How is this fair?" UK government figures show that Scottish exports to the rest of the UK are more than 3 times higher than those to the 27 EU countries.